Juzi Bwana Churchill ametangaza ati sasa bei ya mafuta itakuwa shilingi 300 kwa lita. Ati kwa sababu ya vita kule Israel na Palestina. Baba each and every liter of oil which they are selling, they are eating 30 shillings.
Walikuwa wamesema huyo mzee wa vitendawili akae huko. Sasa hivi wanaliwa wanasema baba njaa inatuuma. Njaa chairman.
Muwapatie hawa viongozi wetu wawili, rais na naibu wa rais, nafasi ya kuongoza hii nchi.
Semeni hey.
Wakenya lazima tuamuke bana. Wakenya lazima tuamuke.
You cannot build an economy through taxation. You cannot build an economy through over-taxation of the poor.
Mheshimiwa Ruto, utaharibu hii nchi yetu mzuri hivi tukiangalia.
To stimulate a stagnating economy, to stimulate an economy that is under recession, you need to put money in the people's pockets.
Wananchi wa Kenya mjitayarishe. Huu jamaa tarehe 12 mwezi wa 8 2027 atakuwa Sigoi akichuna mahindi.
There must be a party leader and a deputy party leader. The rest can be whatever they want to be. And we are demanding that as members of UDA.
We have one party leader, and so importantly also to have one deputy party leader. Na sio ni ukweli? Kama party leader ni mmoja, deputy wake anakuwa mmoja.
Chama ya UDA ikaikuwa ya UDA.
The UDA party will rule 100 years plus. And it is because we want to deliver.
We are going to build a huge mass movement called UDA. A serious political machine.
Kwanza huyo deputy president ameingiwa na kasumba kwa kichwa yake.
Kwani nini ngumu? Kujipanga tu.
And because he's a deputy president, yeye ndiye anapanga Rutoto, sijui Malala, sijui Kawaya kule nini, sijui Omar Hassan Mombasa, atinenda ni kusukume Luyaland na wewe Ukambani ndio ufuruke senior politicians kwa hiyo area, ndio 2032 ikifika hawa senior wasinisuie mimi deputy.
Mwenye maneno ni huyu. Si ndio? Si huyo ndio yako na maneno?
Deputy President, listen to me. Whether you like it or not, in 2032, wakati uliona Uhuru akatoka na Ruto akaingia, safari Ruto anatoka na Muluya anafanya nini?
Hata pale Meru kumekuwa na matatizo. Imeamuliwa pale kwa Senate. Nilikuwa pale mbele, nimewaita. Tukaelewana. Kukakuwa amani mwaka moja. Tena wakasosana tena. Tukasema wangangane tuone vile itakuwa. Sasa si imekuwa vile imekuwa. Pia nitawaita tena, hiyo ndio kazi yangu. Niite gavana, niite wabunge, niite MCAs, nijaribu kuwarudisha pamoja kwa sababu Meru County is also very important to administration. Pale katika Kericho ambaye ni backyard yetu pia. Governor, deputy walikuwa na sosana, nikawaketisha na MCA, pale iko amani, maendeleo inaendelea. Hapa Kiambu, governor, MCAs, wabunge walikuwa na sosana, nimewaketisha, tumesikizana, tumepata amani.
Embu lazima isimame. Hakuna vita utasikia ikiwa imetoka hapa Embu County. Najua kunaweza kuwa na watu hapa ambao wangetaka kuweka vitina kidogo, lakini lazima tushikane kama viongozi wa Embu County, yale ambayo inawafanyika huko Meru na kaunti zingine isije ikafanyika hapa.
Kwa hivyo mimi nataka viongozi wa Embu, tafadhali msitake nimuite kuunganisha nyinyi. Mkuja mambo ya maendeleo peke yake.
They try to intimidate you, umekataa. Najua amekutafuta wakunyamazisha na hapa umewambia ninarega.
Nikali ni uzoefu wa siasa. Yenze niko na experience ya politics 4 times more than the deputy president. He must respect our community. We are not a small community. We are a community of 7 million people.
Kenya is an expensive government to run. The inefficiency of government is very high. Wastages are very high. And because of that, a government which is inefficient, when they do business, business becomes expensive.
Mwenyezi Mungu kwa miaka 5 hakutujalia mvua. Sasa ndio tumeanza kupata mvua. na hii mvua tunaamini kwa baraka zake Mwenyezi Mungu ifikiapo mwaka ujao chakula itaanza kupatikana katika taifa hili.
Kwanza, kabla hatujajipanga na vile tutakuwa na chakula ya kutosha, lazima tujipange kulinda mazingira, ndio mvua ipatikane, maji ipatikane, ndio tuweze kuzalisha chakula.
Mimi najua mambo ni magumu na mambo ni mazito, lakini hakuna mtu atakayetoka nje kuja kusaidia Wakenya. Itabidi sisi wenyewe tuweze kujisaidia.
Saa hizi tumefunga, makampuni zimefunga because of lack of cash. Na sisi tunajua gavana ambaye alikuwa amepitisha bill katika katika assembly ya Kakamega ya 100 million ya kusaidia farmers. So lazima pia wewe kabla uongee mambo ya Mumias, ujiulize wewe what role have you played in terms of helping farmers wetu kupanda miwa. Hiyo lazima tuongee. Sasa wale ambao wanasema sasa unaambia nani na mimi nasema ukweli. So kwa hivyo tunasema kwa sababu mimi nasema hivi lazima because agriculture
All right, looking at the current state of play within the Kenya Kwanza, this is how it looks. It is pelting of eggs right now, as you can see it here. Kalwale, amongst others as well. Everyone they do have eggs on their faces, and you can see also the one in the pram there, who is really causing all this, as you've heard from the soapbox this morning. What is happening in the Kenya Kwanza fraternity, especially with the UDA elections really coming up. This seems to be also causing quite a wide chasm within UDA as it stands right now. This is what Victor has drawn today. And you heard about now the 30 shillings that is being, of course, extorted from Kenyans, as it has been put by Honorable Raila Odinga there, and you can see Adozie is loading. He says soon he will be revealing the fuel scandal government to government dossier. So we are eagerly waiting to see how that will also pan out as well. We gave you this much earlier. But also we have the South African opposition leader Julius Malema, who has told off Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua after he asked him to keep off Kenyan politics on allegations that he disrespected President William Ruto's leadership. Malema says no political leader from the continent should be gagged from pointing out any yields bedeviling an African country, even as he warned the opposition from resulting to violence over election disputes. Chris Nyang has more on this.
The stand of President William Ruto about the ongoing war that is not covered by anyone in TRC.
It is a statement that seemed to have rubbed the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua the wrong way for a man who has been outright defending his boss, President William Ruto.
Huyu amekuja ni mjuaji, amefika asubuhi. Saa 8 mambo ya Kenya anajua hata kuliko sisi. Si mlimsikia yeye? Na pale kwao nilikuwa hapo December. Rationing ya stima ni 7 hours. Na sisi hatuongei kwa sababu tunaheshimu hawa.
However, in a quick rejoinder, the firebrand South African politician leader in a meeting with young Kenyan legislators told off Gachagua, saying criticism is not meant to fight the governing regime.
Those who are not happy with me say, get out of Kenya politics. Kenya, this is not South Africa. This is my home. This is my politics. Kenya's politics are my politics. The same way the politics of South Africa are yours. The ones of President Ruto are also not happy with me. Because I said, why would you say you are a Pan-Africanist? Because Pan-Africanism is necessitated by the fact that we are an oppressed nation.
Malema, who arrived in the country to launch the Pan-African Institute at Kenya University, offered a scathing criticism of President William Ruto's administration, claiming he had not fulfilled his 2022 promises.
Stay true to what you are saying. It doesn't matter how many people are criticizing you or not.
Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary Korir Sing'oei, in defense of Deputy President, said Kenya is open to fair criticism from leaders of other countries if they do not undermine cordial relations. Through his X page, Sing'oei said, and I quote, "Quite to the contrary, I was clarifying that the country's leadership welcomes fair criticism. All His Excellency the Deputy President sought to emphasize was that criticism from leaders of friendlier nations must be tempered with restraint, lest it undermines interstate committee." The outspoken
Odinga to become president of Kenya one day, no amount of cheating will stop that.
Grace Nganga, KTN News, Nairobi.
Right, we're watching Global today, and I wanted just to begin with the departmental committee member there, Yusuf Hassan, to just comment on this. This is a matter of foreign relations. Is it bound to really affect also of our cordial relationship with South Africa? But now being given that he's an opposition leader from South Africa, how should he have reacted the wisest of fashion? The reaction from the deputy president, is it called for? What should be the decorous way of presenting ourselves in this situation?
Well, I think both of them have the right. I think any African, any person can talk about our national politics and our national leadership, and the deputy president is right in defending his president against what he considers to be unwarranted attacks. But also when you see a leader like Julius Malema, is that the language and the tone he used is perhaps what I take issue with, not the content of what he said. It's just the way he had presented his speech, which was quite condescending and not appropriate for a leader of an opposition. But he behaves the same way in South Africa as well, when he speaks against his president. So I think I wouldn't give it too much weight. I mean, people can come here and speak about whatever issues of interest to them. We're a free country. Our constitution allows the freedom of speech and the freedom of association and so on, which is, I think, what the principal secretary is referring to. But of course, also there has to be some respect for the leadership of any country, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with it, with them or with him. And I think I take issue with his language and the manner in which he presented his case against the president. He could have said it in much better and much more subtle way than he did. But obviously there are some people who like populist leaders like Malema and who feel that in fact he has spoken for many silent people in this country. But having said that, also our politics is the same. I think our politics are peculiar. The Kenyan political system is not based on any ideological bearings. It doesn't have any, it's not based on any principles or values. It is just naked politics. And Kenyan's politics are driven by individual politicians who position themselves in the right place to calculate some of the issues that we have seen. Of course, it is important to talk about the cost of living. Of course, it is important to talk about the state of our economy. But our politics seem to revolve around permanent election campaigns. You're not criticizing the government in place or the ruling party because it's not doing the right things and it's not governing well. You're demonizing it so that you can have an advantage come the 2027 election. And we are in 2023. For heaven's sake, we have 4 years to go. Let's work on policies, on issues.
Thank you.
And let our politics be driven by ideas. Let's have a national agenda rather than this constant weekend attacks, individual attacks against one politician or another.
Right.
And I think Malema is cut from the same cloth.
Right. So, Dr. Hassan Kanyanja, from your own estimation, would you say that Julius Malema is a Pan-Africanist?
Personally, I absolutely have no issue with what Malema said. And the reason is, one, he's Julius Malema. And anyone who pays attention to Julius Malema, he says things that many in this place will find jarring to the ear. He will say the same thing in London. He will say the same thing in the United States. He does not mince his words, and he'll say it to Ramaphosa directly, and he has done that. And if you watch parliamentary proceedings, you're going to see that. So Julius Malema is simply being typical of Julius Malema. There is really nothing surprising. It's just the same way we're used to Sonko. Okay, we're not going to make noise because he says something outrageous. I think he's very popular with a lot of young people, but he's going to say it anyway.
So the reason I'm asking this is the choice of Julius Malema as the keynote speaker for this particular opening of Pan-African
But number two,
Institute.
I have no doubt when it comes to his passion for Pan-Africanism. And I've watched him from the time he was in his 20s, up to now. He used to be like a youth winger, then of ANC. And he's been fairly consistent. He has grown, and he admits that. But I've heard some people say, I think Senator Gerard Gay, say that he should be deported or banned, from coming to Kenya. I think Gerard Gay is a very hardworking, senator. But I think he was 5 years old when we were actually fighting for multipartyism in this country. So perhaps he may not really understand what it takes to actually be free. This is what makes Kenya special. This is what makes Kenya exceptional, different. That you could come from a foreign country and you could say things that may appear like you're insulting the president, and we're not going to put you in prison or in the dungeons, because we are the bellwether state in terms of freedoms. We are still fighting, of course, towards making ourselves more perfect. But we have to demonstrate that tolerance to continue being an exceptional country in this part of the world. The tone, of course, as Mheshimiwa has said, is disturbing. But then that is Julius Malema. That is the tone with which he actually communicates. And so the vice president or the deputy president, of course, is right to defend his boss when he feels that his character is being besmirched, but also because of the political issues that surround such kind of narratives. But to the extent that Malema should have a right to come and, they should, any time. Malcolm X was in this country in the 60s, I think, or in 69. They would go all over the world saying things that some governments were, uncomfortable with. Tom Mboya, during March to Washington, was one of the only Africans who actually spoke in there. What he said was not exactly pleasant to the white establishment. And I want to ask Kenyans to go back. Actually, his speech is recorded, it's still there. What did he say? Did that please Americans? No, absolutely not. And so it's the president himself has actually come out as very Pan-African. And it does not mean that everything he has said perhaps is supported by everybody. Neither is all his actions going to be supported by every African. But I think a lot of people have seen and recognized his passion to ensure that Africa can rely also on itself, but also can chart a future that is a little bit different. Now, of course, sometimes there's a difference between rhetoric and reality. And governance sometimes comes with a lot of challenges, as of course I think all of us are seeing, But I'm not going to doubt his Pan-African credentials per se, because of some of the misgivings that may be coming up. So neither am I going to doubt Malema, who's been in fact, we talk about populism. Part of him is populist, but also part of it is not exactly populist. And here's the reason why. South Africa has been known on this continent to also be very xenophobic against South Africans. And he's only one of the few South African politicians actually up there who is very, very adamant in defending other Africans' right to be in South Africa and for them not to be attacked. That does not exactly make him very popular with a lot of other South Africans, but is a risk he's willing to take because of his passion for Pan-Africanism. So his tone might be disturbing, but I don't think anyone doubts that he's very Pan-African. And of course, he says a lot of controversial issues, and that's just Julius Malema.
That is just Julius Malema, so let him be. What will you say, Professor Kagwanja?
Well, I was in South Africa when Julius Malema and a team of other youth drove President Thabo Mbeki out of office. And President Thabo Mbeki's chief of staff, our Koske, wrote a book about the 8 hours. And of course, South African politics is mature. Mbeki was mature. So he was recalled to Rudhuri House, which is the headquarters of the ANC. And the person who wanted to deliver the message was Malema. Malema put Mushorozi, who is Jacob Zuma, as they call him there, to power, literally. And within no time, he was not in good books with Mushorozi. And he worked, and you'd actually say that he's one of those people who brought Mushorozi down, the President Jacob Zuma, with that. He's one of the best public intellectuals I have ever come across on this continent. When you listen to his speeches, and I have done that, to see, because I wanted you to see the sense in this person who is so powerful, and he's so eloquent, he's so articulate, he is so, conscientious about us. By us, I mean African. He's a quintessential Pan-Africanist. When Raila Odinga read the resistance movement here from January 23, the only voice that stood against him at certain point was Malema. Remember, at the same time, Malema is organizing protests in South Africa against the petroleum and energy, the power outage. But he wanted to do a distinction between what he was doing there and what was happening here, that you must accept election results and fight that fight as a separate war, and at the same time fight the issues about cost of living and energy crisis separately. So we must separate these two things. That's a very sophisticated intellectual take on what was seen as a general phenomena in Africa, that Africa is in protest. And Malema said, our protest is about basic things about energy. We accept Ramaphosa as our president who was elected, but we are holding him to account. So when he comes to Kenya, Malema is not doing anything exceptional. Our own Tom Mboya would move from United States to Ghana to Algeria. If you look at the roadmap of Tom Mboya in the short period he lived, he was less in Kenya than in other countries. In Uganda he's making speeches, in Tanzania he's making speeches. It is Pan-African. If you take, for example, Mkapa, the former president of Tanzania, how many speeches has he made here? How many speeches did he make in Mozambique? How many speeches did he make in Botswana about the conflict between Kama and his deputy, and so on? Now, if you take Nkrumah, for example, his movement across Africa in terms of speeches, Pan-Africanism is a real movement, and Kenya cannot shield itself from it. I must say here that President Ruto is now one of the most powerful Pan-African voices, right? And he's a powerful Pan-African voice not because he's a Kenyan. It is because he touched the nerve of what makes one a Pan-Africanist. And Kenya, the two presidents, both President Uhuru Kenyatta and Ruto, have put us on a pedestal of Pan-African leadership, that the only thing required of us is to be consistent. Obviously, Kenya is a pragmatic country, that we admit, and we are going to be criticized here and there about this or that because of our pragmatism. But the truth of the matter is that statements like jail Malema, ban Malema from coming to this country reminds us of the 1991 calls for chop the fingers of multi-party advocates. Honorable Cherugei and other senators, stop that. It's not helpful for our country. If Malema is coming to spew nonsense, just go back and look at South African Parliament. He actually get a State of Nation address stopped. Yes. And Ramaphosa has to postpone it. Democracy is about tolerance. It is not about spewing fire and brimstone. No. Democracy is something we defend. And whether it's Malema or it is whoever activist, let's not be like some of our neighbors who cannot tolerate discussion. This country is the way it is. We are developing the way we are developing because we are tolerant. We are tolerant on the front of faith. We are tolerant on matters of identity, whether you are Kamau or Otieno. We are tolerant on the matter of our intellectual bringing. There are some of us who are not professors, and we have to sit down with them and reason with them. And reasoning is what this country is about. We reason together. Malema said what he said, and we listen to him and we move on. But Malema is not somebody who can wish away. He is the conscience of a number of people in South Africa. Those people who have not moved to South Africa during xenophobia. Oh, it's not an easy game to see a Mozambican burning there on the tires just because he's a Mozambican, and the fact that he had a job. The only sin the Mozambican has is that he's on tire, what do they call neck racing, because he had a job. And assumedly, the Zulu did not get a job. It takes the conscience of Malema to say, no, this cannot happen in this country. And that's where they differed on some of the leadership of ANC. Some of them who had moved towards that direction, that we must preserve our jobs from Zimbabweans, from Mozambicans and others. So the point here is the statements we are seeing in the papers in response to Malema are not Kenyan. They don't reflect our democracy. I do not condone somebody coming from outside and saying bad things about my president. But why don't you let the ordinary Malemas of this country also answer him? Why would you want to debate him at the government level? He did not come as a government. Don't equate him with the government of South Africa. This is an opposition leader.
He's an opposition leader.
Yes, who is known to speak his mind, and who speaks his mind with a consequence. The moment he brands you like this, and then you take on him, then you have accepted that what he is saying is right. Leave Malema alone. If you want him to be debated, get the Kagwanjas and others as the Kanenjas of this world to debate Malema. But no, the government, just keep off, because Malema is an opposition leader.
Thank you. Right, so Honorable, Doctor, they normally say that, and I've normally used this particular phrase, that you cannot see the picture if you're in the frame. So Malema actually sees the picture because he's out of the frame. So when he speaks here, he sees clearly what is happening around us and within this country as well. I don't know, what would be your comment?
Three things here, Ainea. One is with Julius Malema. You can't expect to extract orange juice from a mango. You're going to get mango juice from a mango. Julius Malema, he is innately a populist politician who the conditions in South Africa have actually produced. He is a rabble-rouser. He can annoy, if that's what you were looking for, and don't dare him.
Yeah, in fact, what I wanted to actually question is the fact that you as academia, and when you have such forums, what really goes, what is the rubric that you use in choosing a guest, maybe to launch an institute like he did, like Lukenya? There has to be a rhyme and reason why he was chosen to actually be the person who will actually be fitting for that particular occasion.
That's where I was coming to, maybe. To be much more direct, before I go to the two other things I wanted to say, is my understanding of what was happening in Lukenya University in launching what they call the Pan-African Institute, probably to study Pan-African issues. Picking on Malema was fairly deliberate, I think. And he may not have been an academic in the conventional sense of that word. He may have shared the platform with fairly known Kenyan public intellectuals, Professor P.L.O. Lumumba, Professor Kivuta Kibwana, and a few others. But what they were looking for is probably somebody who can give them instant, news. It has done it. We are now talking about what happened there. But if you go back to the kind of intellectualism of the 1960s, the people who used to be common in Taifa Hall of the University of Nairobi then were the tomboyas of this world that my colleagues have mentioned. Don't remember how many times Tom Mboya debated with people in Taifa Hall, the Dennis Okumus, the trade unionists of the time. So it is not out of the ordinary to have Malema in academic halls speaking the way he was speaking. Number two, whether he is a Pan-Africanist or not, I think that's a debate that is neither here nor there. If you look at Malema, Malema is a creation of our time and the situation that you have in Africa at the moment. And he has discovered a way of speaking into some of the common problems that affect ordinary people across Africa, regardless of the national boundaries that we talk about. Talk about poverty. That is an African problem. Talk about unemployment. It's an African problem. Talk about, xenophobia. Is really an African problem. So that way, he can actually sell to ordinary people in Cairo, he can sell to ordinary people in Abuja in Nigeria, or you're talking about Dakar in Senegal, just like he can do in Nairobi. He has a fairly African constituency that you cannot get rid of. And finally, I'm not overly surprised by the response that we are receiving, particularly from the Kenyan leadership. Just look clearly. It's fairly possible that they may not have or appreciate where Malema is coming from. The senator who is speaking, he has a right, whether you're talking about the deputy president or any other leader, to defend the president. But also appreciate that there is a way in which some of the country has moved on, the continent has moved on, but a few of our leaders are stuck in a certain time lag when dissent was not very kindly received, when tolerance was a foreign word to our politics. Perhaps what we need to do is to have fora like what we are having today, which can contribute to awareness rising, not just to the public, but also to our leaders. That the Kenya of the 1990s is not the Kenya of today. Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly is something that is guaranteed. If you don't agree with Malema, take your forum and respectively differ with him.
Right. I wonder if I may come to you, or maybe it's for the academicians, Honorable Yusuf Hassan, because we've heard previously as well, we saw William Ruto being installed, or maybe unveiling the William Ruto Leadership Institute in Makerere University previously. Looking at other institutions that we've had, especially in the academia, why, what is the nexus and what really informs maybe an institutions of academia to pick a politician? Is it because they've been following the leadership style, the leadership philosophy of someone, and that they will feel like, okay, we have this institution that we want to unveil, and this is the right person that we think should be the epitome of this particular institution? So, for instance, now, I don't know if it's purely Pan-African Institute, and it's not attached in any way in Malema's name, but we can see other institutions that we have. Confucius Institute, we know the philosophy of Confucius. We can see USAU also, they do have Manu Chandari Institutes, right? So just when we're talking about business acumen, he's an icon, an iconic figure that we can actually relate. So is there any philosophy? Is there any ideal that really informs naming after an institution to a politician?
Well, I think most cases is that those institutions are funded by the individual.
They are funded by
the number one issue.
Okay.
And secondly, the institutions finds value in that person's ideas and wants to associate with that particular person. So, and it's a common practice. Universities all around the world have centers, think tanks, research institutes, and forums that allow people like Ruto, who has had a leadership role, to have a platform and a center where they can articulate or collect, and also eventually collect their ideas, their speeches, and becomes the center of their thinking. For example, in South Africa, there's the Thabo Mbeki Leadership Institute at the University of South Africa, which has done quite a lot on working on Pan-African ideas. And for Lukenya University to have a Pan-African Institute is a great idea. We're part of the African continent. And to a certain extent, there isn't a center of that kind in Kenya that focuses purely on the ideology of Pan-Africanism, the concept and the philosophy of Pan-Africanism. And this is an issue, I think, South Africa, Ghana, even Ethiopia have an edge over us. So I think it is welcome. And as has been noted here, they couldn't do better than getting a popular, controversial figure like Julius Malema to launch it. They have got the necessary publicity, the necessary momentum. The question now is for them to continue, perhaps to make it a more viable and an institution that can deliver intellectually and in terms of ideas. And I think I agree. I was in South Africa also, and I know Malema personally when he was the chairman of the ANC Youth League. And he really played a major role in the destruction of Thabo Mbeki, whom I believe was one of the best African leaders and one of the best Pan-Africanists. And so to a certain extent, you see also the destructive behavior of Julius Malema. He then brought Zuma, Jacob Zuma, whom I also know personally in his early days before the ANC took power, who was removed because of corrupt activities. He was the vice president of Thabo Mbeki. And unfortunately, instead of bringing a new dynamic figure from the ANC movement, Malema was instrumental in bringing Jacob Zuma. And although eventually they fell out and he in fact left the ANC as a result of that. But I think also he's played somehow a very negative role in some ways in the politics of South Africa and has undermined one of the most important Pan-Africanist thinkers.
In the name of
Thabo Mbeki,
yes,
whom I have a lot of
respect for,
regard and respect for, because he also was one of the key people in the formation of the African Union with other African leaders. He conceptualized the idea of the African Renaissance. So Julius Malema is a contradictory and a conflicting figure in the Pan-African movement, if you look at it.
So is there any import in what he said? Because we've looked and analyzed his nature of saying, but the content of his saying, is there any import to what he said?
Yeah, but much of the political populism, political rhetoric is not matched by action. I find that, yeah, people make beautiful speeches. He's a rabble-rouser who captures the imagination of the young people of Africa, who are yearning for a united, prosperous Africa. And they're looking for meaning in what he's saying.
Right.
But of course, Pan-Africanism and the concept of African unity requires a much more thorough effort and an investment than we're doing at the moment.
Right, but I've loved some of the reels that are actually on YouTube on Malema they tickle me a lot. He takes on the head of states head on.
Entertainment value?
The entertainment value is very refreshing. Just listening to him, I mean, you'll wonder, I mean, where does he really get the chicks to, talk to a president like that?
He's a brilliant.
But I wanted to ask, since we have this brand of politics that he is carrying, you're talking about a rubber rouser, and you're talking about you've actually analyzed his intellectual provenance as well in terms of what he's articulates at the end of the day. But the rubber rouser and the intellectual brand of politics, I don't know how he manages that, because I'll wonder what happens even in that particular parliament where there is a standing order that you can actually take on a president and call him some expletives that cannot even utter them on air right now. Yes. Because even within parliament you'll shudder. I mean, this is a head of state. How would you have such an indecorous terms level against the head of state, calling him a rapist, so to speak? I mean, he's a head of state at the end of the day. I'll shudder if I would do that. And if this is a person that then we elevate and we say this is a brand of politics that our young people should actually be emulating, then I think we need to question the brand of politics that is being steamrolled here.
Yes. It's true. I think Malema was instrumental in getting rid of the two presidents, and I was curious when I found it really, interesting also when he actually made reference to Thabo Mbeki in terms of Pan-Africanism during his recent speech, and so I think in retrospect, he realizes how Pan-African Thabo Mbeki was, but. Just to mention something, and I think both of you have lived in South Africa, I think after Mandela, then Thabo Mbeki, there was an attempt at what I call Zulunization of ANC. And let's remember, after the first elections, the Zulus voted overwhelmingly for Chief Mongotsuzu Buthelezi at the time. And so they were attempting Zulunizing the ANC by bringing lots of Zulus, and then Malema almost became kind of a spokesperson. Of course, Zuma was now the grandfather, but Malema became the engine that actually so that happened. Now, I want to also distinguish between the domestic politics of South Africa and the way he also looks at the rest of Africa, for instance. And the domestic politics can be nasty. Now, is he one of the most polite person? Absolutely not. That is his nature. He's not exactly polite, and so it's not like we're trying to model our children so they disrespect their elders in the house. And frankly, he has brilliant ideas, but he may not exactly have a pragmatic or practical program of governance. If today he were to be elected, president, for instance. Certainly, a lot of his proposals are very revolutionary. They're very radical. And just looking at the context of even within South Africa, it may be a little bit of challenging actually to be able to implement that. But that happens a lot with extreme populism. You make people believe there is a lot more in the kitchen than there actually is. And so, in pragmatic terms, he may not exactly be able to deliver some of those things concerning the realities. But to the extent that he speaks to certain things that are very imminent and steep into the consciousness, not just of Africans, but a lot of people of African gene pool, Malema is watched and followed by people in Brazil, in the United States, name it, in Britain, everywhere. But more so, people in much of the global South. He's probably one of the loudest voice in speaking when it comes to the crimes being committed by Israel against Gaza. South Africa, of course, is known as a country that has been probably one of the foremost country, in part because of its history of apartheid, of siding with the Palestinian people. And so he resonates with people far beyond the borders of Kenya. So even as we respond to him, we also need to understand the kind of following he has, around the world. And so I do agree with Prof here. I wasn't good if I'm in government, I'm not going to pick a fight with him. Sometimes it's like picking a fight with Donald Trump on Twitter. He's going to destroy you, because he just has a lot more, just more louder, on there. And so there are a number of things, of course, he says, and even the recent speech when you're speaking about, it doesn't matter how many times you're going to lose the election, you should never elect the path of violence. That even if it was stolen right from you, you see. When you look at that, it's not exactly because that he was condemning one side or the other. He was trying to say nothing is worth killing a fellow African. But at the same time, I think expressing some of the sentiments and frustrations that may be shared by people beyond even this country, and especially when it comes to delivery of services by governments generally. In South Africa, he's been leading, demonstrations because of those power outages. And so he may be loud and crazy, but, sometimes he says things, of course, that, make sense. It's just that sometimes the manner in which he puts it makes it uncomfortable for us to listen to it. But we should never try to mute him, because he's a voice that is needed, even no matter how controversial, of course, that voice is. I think it's needed.
You want to say something before
yes,
we break?
Yes. I mean, first and foremost, let's not look at the Malema phenomenon as a static phenomenon. He started off as a charlatan. A charlatan is somebody who is used by politicians to basically throw mud at their enemies. And also, you're not just a rabble-rouser, but you're a person who basically is thrust to the floor to do the worst. What you, as a dignified politician, cannot do, you get somebody else to do. That was the Malema I knew, and as the chair of the ANC. And the ANC elite, who are anti-Mbeki, effectively used Malema for that purpose. Remember that time he was just a youth, he has no resources, has no networks, and therefore he was at the mercy of politicians. But when Jacob Zuma went to office, Malema changed. He got some, of course, some crowd and some conscience. And what happens is that I don't think, I seek to differ with some of those who define Malema as a populist. Malema is not a populist. Malema is not a populist. He's what you'd call a radical Pan-Africanist. Because Pan-Africanism has always come in ideological shades. You remember the Casablanca bloc, and you remember the Monrovia bloc. The Monrovia were the conservatives, the tomboyers and so on. The Casablanca were the radicals. By radical we mean you are literally on the African agenda, nothing but African agenda. Malema is a true heir of Martin Luther King. He's a true heir of Malcolm X, because the agenda they never completed on the Pan-African front was to venture into the economic liberation. And that's what many of our leaders are not brave enough. And that's why you saw these coup d'etats in Francophone Africa. They are all about economic liberation. And he formed a party that is all about economic liberation. Now, the style and the tactics and the strategies of his party and everything may not be agreeable with them from a sober mind perspective. But the agenda is right. That's why he's famous. He was the most famous person in Zimbabwe. Why? Because he actually, contrary to what the whites would like him to do in South Africa, he supported the land seizures in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, and actually say that that's also going to happen in South Africa, because natural resources must be shared equitably among races. This is his idea. And the idea of the economic liberation is all about getting the empowerment of the black people from a genuine perspective. Here in Kenya, it is our agenda to economically liberate our people. And that is the platform on which William Ruto was elected, and so on. But when it comes to commenting, if you have entered the ring, you cannot complain about where you are going to be knocked. That you knocked me in the head, you should not have done that. Our leadership here in Kenya has entered the Pan-African ring. Remember, we have made a statement on about every corner or every event in Africa, from Niger to Gaza to everywhere. Therefore, why do you expect that nobody is going to respond to that? In terms of judging whether what you are saying is in line with the Pan-African ideal, and that's where Malema is coming in. Malema is not your rabble-rouser anymore. His time of being a rabble-rouser is gone. He's now a kind of a conscience. You may not agree with his radical Pan-Africanism, but at least he comes from a certain ideological hue.
We'll take a short break right now. When we circle back, talking about, of course, the African voice as well. We need to take the smooth with the rough and open to criticism as it's being also being shared here on the panel. The story that we want to look at, even as we went that particular front, is that